Looking to resume our regular meeting of council for Tuesday, October the 14th. Agenda items, I have nothing new to add. I think we're good. So looking for approval of the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Public participation. This is the time, folks. You're welcome to come up and make some comments on whatever you like. This is your turn to council. Come on, Terry.
Hello. Hi, my name is Terry Lim. I live at 501 Outlook Place, and I'm here to support or suggest that the council have an amalgamation question on the upcoming ballot. I think it would be a good thing for open government, and I think we should allow the taxpayer to have a say. That's it.
Thank you. And for the latecomer, this is public participation. If you have anything you would like to comment on, you're more than welcome to hit the mic. Name and address. Anybody else? Last and final chance. Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you. Mayor's message. I think we have a presentation from Councillor Day today, so you can.
Thanks. We just want to share with you our good fortune. We won this Honorable Mention Award at UBCM for the User-Friendly Trails Guide Initiative. This is the booklet. There's more copies by the agendas if you want to see them or take a copy home. This is a number of years of work, and it has been in collaboration with all of the West Shore municipalities through the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues, including Souk, View Royal, Highlands, Machosen, Langford, Colwood, and View Royal. And we also partnered with the Capital Regional District Parks Department, who received an age-friendly grant, and we had a Measuring Up grant. So this award is for accessibility and inclusion in your community. And one of the great things about receiving this award is that on the UBCM website, the initiative is now listed with all of the documentation on there as a best practice example of best practices. And what's really innovative about it is that the mapping gives you an elevation profile, so you can tell how difficult the trail is going to be, how far it is to the nearest resting location, whether it's a bench or a picnic table. And there's at least one trail in every community that's been identified in the guide. It's being really well read in terms of local small businesses are using this. It's being used by beds and breakfast. It's being used in tourism launches. Is very, very popular. And there's also an online version that's hosted through the West Shore Parks and Recreation website that is going to be updated as more trails become available and more user-friendly amenities exist. They will be put out there to people, so maybe when you get tired of your dog-eared paper copy, you'll be able to go online and check out what's new that maybe you've never tried before.
Thank you. Anyone else for anything this week? Seeing none, then I'll finish it up with a reminder for the Black and White fundraiser ball that the Coast Collective is putting on. Information can be found on their website, coastcollective.ca. It is this Friday, October the 17th, and they have a multitude of activities and things going on there. Tickets include dancing, hot and cold appetizers, cash bar, silent auction, anonymous art sale, raffles, 50-50, on-site collaborative collective painting that will be done by the guests that are in attendance. So we could see some interesting things come out of there. So tickets are still available. Moving on to adoption of the minutes of the special meeting of council, September 29th.
So moved.
Yeah, just one adoption. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Looking to receive 3 sets of minutes, one for Colwood Cycling Advisory Committee, June the 2nd, another for Heritage Commission, September 10th, And the final one, Planning and Land Use Committee, September 16th.
Move receipt, Your Worship.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Correspondence requiring council direction. There is a letter within our package for funding request from the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee. The letter and with information on the CRED program. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I am the chair and the writer of the letter. This letter has been circulated to all municipalities. The Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee represents all 13 municipalities and all 3 school districts. And together, it's our job to know the circumstances for youth who may come into contact with the law. One of the resources that's available in our community is the Mobile Youth Services Team, which is a team of 1, unfortunately. And that position works throughout all 13 municipalities and in all 3 school districts and on all First Nations to track and assist youth, particularly sexual exploitation of youth, which very often is in more than one community or crosses boundaries over time. Our youth population is very mobile, and they have had assistance from a program that with provincial funding called CRED, and the Crime Reduction and Education Division. It's taken a long time for the CRED program to gain the expertise that's needed to intervene on behalf of youth who are being targeted by gangs or subject to sexual exploitation associated with organized crime. And there are a number of gangs, 9, that are known to exist in the CRD and the greater Vancouver area. And one of those gangs was centered in the West Shore and went from a very few members to between 40 and 60 active members in a short period of time, a matter of months. So with this knowledge, unfortunately, the provincial government did not continue the funding for CRED. The Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee committed $2,500 from our very small budget to assist with the program. And I committed to request all of the municipalities to support it in the amount of $500 in addition to those contributions to carry this program on until March, when the provincial government should have the opportunity to refund the program, establish funding for them again. And one of the things that's happening is that the gangs in Vancouver, who are the subject of considerable additional resources to deal with problems that are occurring over there, are now coming over here because there's less heat on the island than there is on the mainland, so to speak. So I have had confirmation from several municipalities that they are supportive of funding this bridge funding for CRED, including Sydney, North Saanich, Central Saanich, View Royal, and Souk that I have confirmed as of right now. And I have checked with our finance department, and the $500 could come from an unallocated grant budget that we do have. And fortunately, I forgot my piece of paper to tell you exactly what the fund balance is, but I believe the balance in the fund is like $1,800, so $500 would not even exhaust the fund.
That's correct. We have $1,800 that is still in our 2014 grant and aid budget that hasn't been allocated, so the $500 could come from there.
So I will leave it at that. I've tried to provide you full information about the program. The counseling program operates out of Pacific Standard Family Services Association on Whale Road. Mia Golden is the counselor, and she is currently assisting 6 youth who have exited the gangs and who are receiving counseling to support them in continuing in that good choice.
So, Councillor Day, in our agenda, there's 2 copies of your letter of request that went out to the regional district, but there is not the request resolution there. Did you have one worded that would cover off on where the funds would come from?
Sure. I would move that we support the CRED bridge funding for the CRED program in the amount of $500 from the unallocated 2014 grants budget.
Second.
Conversation, discussion from council? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I know. Did you like that one?
Under Old Business, Finance and Administration Committee, we have item 6.1.1, memo from, in regards to the non-binding 2014 ballot question on amalgamation. There is before us here a status report. Just for the benefit of those in the audience, we did look at this back in July of 2013, at which time Councillor Lukens was heading a committee in order to get interested people from within the community to come forward and participate in determining what would be the best kind of question for our area and how that might work. We advertised, we Twittered and social media'd and websited and newspaper ads, meeting information, and we had 3 individuals take up interest. Yeah, only 2 from Colwood, and 1 of those had to withdraw. So there we were, with 3 individuals potentially for a committee of a population base of 17,000. Wasn't hardly representative of interest in the community. So council then went back and rescinded that motion and decided, well, then maybe there's no need for that specific interaction and a ballot question. So we left it at that. At that time, we were only 2 municipalities that were entertaining it in the first place. Since then, there's been a number of others that have come up. Contrary to the media report, I don't feel this is a flip-flop. This is really us trying to engage with the public and reading that back as being a non-interest. So now that we've got a bigger uptake throughout the region, I think there's 8 municipalities now who are entertaining some form of a question. And council, you'll find the list of that as part of your report. We're now at a position where I'm going to turn it over to you to have that conversation. We have a number of options that are before us we can simply adhere to what we did on rescinding that decision and leave it there. We could reaffirm that we're not going to put it on the ballot, but instead make a resolution that we will entertain whatever the outcome is based on those other municipalities. We could pass a resolution to direct staff to include a non-binding opinion question on this ballot, or we can just receive for information. So those, or something else if you want to come up with it. So that was the best I could come up with in dealing with this and staff's assistance. So that's where we're at. So I'll open it up to discussion. Councillor Lukens.
You knew I'd have to have my 2 cents in this, but it's frustrating to think that Colwood residents are now coming out of the woodwork in order to ask council to do this, that it's democracy This council was the only council in the entire CRD that took the initiative proactively to do anything about this question. And the reason we did that was to try and engage and inform the public and allow you to participate in the process so that we put the right question on the ballot. It's now almost just 1 month away until the next election. There are some municipalities that are putting a question on the ballot. I think the majority of them are putting on a different question. It is a non-binding question. We at the City of Colwood have one staff person that manages our election process. I'm not sure how that person would manage if we were to ask them to do that at this late point. The other thing is there is a cost associated with putting a question on the ballot. It's not just a matter of putting a question on the ballot. And I don't know that people realize that. I personally, at this point in time, do not support putting a question on the ballot. And it's not because I do or do not support amalgamation. I would not support an amalgamation question on the ballot regardless. I have said that from day one. What I would support is what Mayor Hamilton spoke of in the second point, and that would be for this council to make a resolution to be part of any process that would be undertaken in order to investigate the options that would be available to us to work better together in this region, whether that's amalgamation, whether that's memorandum of understandings, whatever it may be. And it must include a review of what role the CRD plays. So there are many things that must be included in this. It's not just about amalgamation because the picture is bigger. And I personally cannot make an informed decision without all of that information, and I don't know how anybody else can other than assume, and we know what that means. So, not that I'm passionate. No, I'm pissed, but I'm passionate. I personally think this is the best option for this community at this point in time, that if we, as a council, support a resolution to go forward saying we would want to participate, that way, everybody, whether you're supportive or you're not, you all get the same information. Hopefully, at that point, you take the time to read it, and then everybody can make an informed decision. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan?
Better? Thank you, through the chair. I think it's our responsibility as your elected officials to make informed decisions. We make informed decisions as best we can with the information in front of us, and we have done that for the past 3 years. We go out and talk to community, we read our reports, we get professional advice from staff, and we sit here and make the best decisions we can. This question is no different. I firmly do not believe spending upwards between $15,000 to $30,000 per municipality to ask a question about receiving and getting information so we can make informed decisions is a good use of taxpayers' money. I absolutely think that's the wrong thing to do. I support Mayor Hamilton and Councillor Lucan's position that, of course, we'll participate in a process where we get full informed information so we can make informed decisions. That's our responsibility.
Councillor Cullington?
Clearly this is a subject that has all of us speaking very passionately. So I'm going to repeat some of the stuff that I said back in July of last year. So I'm personally not in favour of amalgamation. Experience elsewhere has shown pretty clearly that it's increased taxes, less accountability, and more bureaucracy. Am I in favour of greater cooperation? Absolutely. I started this morning with a meeting with a number of the other municipalities talking about sewage. We participate in lots of cooperative efforts through West Shore Policing, through Wanda Fuca, all kinds of other things. So I think there's lots that we can do and should do together. Having said that, that's my personal opinion, and in a way that's irrelevant. It's what the community wants. But I think this community did it right, and I was supportive last time around when Councillor Lukens brought forward what I thought was a very good process, where we engage the community and get the right question. Because to me, amalgamation is not a question, it's a possible solution. I think what we need to know is, what are the issues out there? that people are concerned about, that lead them to think that amalgamation is the answer to this? Is it regional policing that people are concerned about? Is it regional transportation? Is it cost effective? What is it that people are trying to get out of this process? And is amalgamation the best way of doing that, or is something else the best way of doing that? But I think we need to properly understand what it is the question is that we're trying to answer. And I think that's part of what we were trying to do with the process that we were trying to set in motion. And I was very supportive of that. It's interesting, I've had conversations with people where they've said, well, if you get to vote on amalgamation, how would you vote? And they've said, well, I don't know, because I don't know whether, if you look at this sort of question of are you in favor of reducing the number of municipalities through amalgamation, they're kind of going, okay, well, I happen to talk to somebody in Langford. I live in Langford. If I answer this question, am I voting in favor of Colwood and Langford amalgamating? Am I talking about the West Shore amalgamating? Am I talking about the whole region? I don't understand the question, so I don't know how I'm going to vote. And I think that kind of, to me, speaks to this importance of a really well understood question and good information behind it. So, like my colleagues, I think we did a really good job of trying to get out ahead of this, but I think that time has now passed. I think in a way our community already spoke loud and clear by saying, not an issue to us. I understand there is one of the many candidates for councillor is a pro-amalgamation person, so there is also an opportunity to vote for that person if you think that that's something that's important to you. But I can't support going forward with a question that's not clear and people really not being sure about exactly what they're voting on. But like others, if this is sort of clearly something that the whole region is going to, Colwood needs to be a part of that discussion. But I'm not in favour of putting it on the ballot at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Day?
Thanks. I'm definitely on the record as not being in favor of amalgamation. My reasoning for that is very simple. I've lived in Colwood since it was incorporated, and it was originally undertaken that all the planning and zoning for the city of Colwood was done through the CRD when we had a CRD regional director instead of a local council. So, I have some very concrete examples in mind of how regional representation didn't work to the advantage of me and my neighbors when that was how we were administered. But I also take note that Sydney, North Saanich, and Central Saanich are all talking about a provincially funded study to investigate the feasibility, costs, and implications of amalgamating their three municipalities. Even to look with a provincially funded study is going to require considerable resources in your community. Your staff are going to be looking at that question instead of looking at other things that there's only so many hours in a day. That's what they're going to be doing. So I chair the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee. I've had to navigate sometimes quite difficult and unusual waters in terms of finding funding and support. Tonight on the agenda was the CRED program, the anti-gang counseling service to get youth out of gangs. And that's, I've been on council for 12 years now, and it's not easy to figure out how do you talk to everybody. It's hard. No doubt there's probably some opportunities for improvement, but I do think that there's some really good points made around the table in terms of how we determine what those areas are that we put our energy into, and where that comes from. I think it needs to come from the citizens of Colwood, and I'm certainly open to hearing that. I'm certainly glad that people are talking about government, because voter engagement is really important to me. One of the things that I campaigned on the last time was to make sure that we get webcasting of our council meetings, so that if you can't get here, you can still figure out what's going on. But for tonight's discussion, I don't think that throwing something out there that hasn't been developed with the support of the community is really going to further our discussion or really use our resources in a concerted way that's going to give you your best bang for your buck. But I still think that people who feel that we should have some discussion about services should bring that up and bring it to the table, and maybe there's more appetite to look at this after the election and figure out, well, what is it that we need to know in order to make a better decision in the future about how we organize our many governments.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Worship. Like my colleagues, I would tend to agree that option number 2 would probably be the best route for us to go. I think despite somebody from Saanich or the City of Victoria not giving 2 hoots about a pothole on Tory Place or speed on Carindale, I'm not sure that the ballot question is actually the right way to go in the first place, where you have traditionally a 23% show at the polls. I mean, that's hardly representative of the community, much like the Angus Reid poll was not representative of the feeling of the community based on their small sampling. And just because it may not be on the ballot doesn't mean that discussion's not going to happen. In fact, we were pretty vocal in the need to look at integrating services, and in fact we've integrated some services already in the past, so it's nothing new for us. And I mean, obviously it's not even clear within the region what should happen, just by simply looking at their various questions that are going to be put on the ballot. It's all over the map. So, with the 11th hour request, and as Councillor Lukens has said quite eloquently, we've discussed this a year ago, and again, not too long ago, and there isn't a clear path in the community, and it's not something that I see as a hot button issue time around, something that would distract the decision making of those at the table. So personally, I am in favor, as I mentioned, of option number 2, that will look at integration of services more than anything.
Everybody's talking about it. I might as well get my 2 cents in too. This was an issue last election when I was door knocking. People were asking about it. They were asking the question about amalgamation and what was going on. And I know other people had heard that as well. And for me, this was a concept not necessarily about amalgamation, but about democracy and about having that ability to give the public their say on something. And I think that's the reason we were driving towards, let's develop a question that works for Colwood, and let's put that on the ballot. And I think there's some responsibility at this table because we weren't able to engage our public to come and develop that question. I don't think that we can get off scot-free, but it's also up to the public to come when we do the things that we did to try and get them to come out and help us develop what that question was. I still very much strongly believe that a question should eventually be asked, but we didn't develop what that question should be. And I cannot see us going to the polls with a question that's going to be just ambiguous. Thank you. So that's been my challenge with this. So I think we need to, in the next election, after the next election, hopefully be working towards hopefully hearing the feedback of our public and moving on. I'm sure that as I door knock this election, people are going to say, why not? Why is there not an amalgamation question? Just like I heard last time. But I also can say that we tried. And we tried to do the best we can, and it's, you know, sometimes it's not perfect and it's not the ideal, but we did make an effort. So and I'm going to be able to live with that. So I'll probably be supporting number 2 as well.
That's everybody around the table, so I need to have a motion on the floor and a seconder, please.
I'll pass item number 2, the resolution reaffirming its June 9th, 2014 decision to not include some form of non-binding opinion question on the 2014 election ballot, and instead resolve to participate in the exploration process for amalgamation or integrated services in the future with one or more municipalities should the opportunity present itself.
So that, in my opinion, doesn't put it on this ballot, but it allows us to go forward to have those conversations and continue the discussions and look to that participation of our community going forward. We need to step up. Anybody else at the table? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. New business, please. Item number 7.1, Planning and Land Use Committee regarding 3411 Karger Terrace.
This is an awesome story, this one. You may recall a few months ago that our building inspector came and shared with us about this building at 3411 Karger Terrace that was 3 or 4 suites and was totally non-compliant. And so the good news is Dennis, our planner, has informed members that the applicant is requesting to vary multiple sections of the land use bylaw number 151 in order to legitimize several unapproved previously constructed modifications or additions to this existing dwelling. The variances requested apply to section 5.6.054, increasing the maximum allowable floor area ratio from 0.4 to 0.525. Section 5.6.055, increasing the maximum allowable gross floor area of a residential building from 350 meters squared to 367.7 meters squared. Section 5.6.061, reducing the minimum allowable front yard setback requirement from 7.5 meters to 6.89 meters. Section 5.6.062AI, reducing the minimum allowable side yard setback requirement for a residential building with a gross floor area greater than 280 meters squared from 3 meters to 1.56 meters, and Section 5.6.063, reducing the minimum allowable rear yard setback requirement from 7.5 to 2.7 meters to accommodate the deck on the northeasterly side of the dwelling from 7.5 meters to 4.91 meters to accommodate the deck on the easterly side of the dwelling. So just so you know, all of these variances, it's already constructed, it's already built, there's nothing changing. We're just going about the process of legalizing it. There was some queries in the audience with respect to whether or not this was going to impact height restrictions, those sorts of things. Has nothing to do with height. What you see is what you get. They're doing renos on the inside to bring it into one suite, etc. So the recommendation to council, and I so move, that the development variance permit number DVP 14007 be authorized for issuance, which would have the effect of varying everything that I mentioned earlier.
Second.
Comments, questions? Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just one question for the planning department in terms of this has the effect of varying almost everything except for height for a building. And I'm just wondering if that sends the message that, you know, if you don't follow the rules, don't worry, you can just adjust them after the fact. Is this going to change anything for future applications coming forward?
Through the chair, we didn't feel that was a serious consideration because there was quite a bit of hassle for this new property in order to bring this into conformance. They had to take a deck off the side of the building. There was a deck that we just couldn't recommend being covered off. I believe there's also a structure that was right on a property line, if not crossing a property line, that had to be removed as well. So there was quite a bit of hassle involved with this process, and we feel that that was, done in the best interest of the community and that they're bringing it into conformance.
Just to follow up on that, to clarify though, for the allowable gross floor area of a residential building, for example, going from 350 square meters to 367.7 square meters, does that mean that a future development can come in and say, oh, well, you allowed this guy to build that big before, so we would like to be able to build that big now too?
No.
Any other questions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Following item is 7.1.2 regarding 1880 Island Highway DVP permit 14010.
So this is the development on Souk Road, the new Royal Bank, et cetera, behind Thrifty's there across from Colwood Corner. They're requesting to vary Section 12AI of the sign bylaw number 60 in order to permit 2 freestanding sign structures. The signs would be located adjacent to each street fronting a new commercial development under the construction. The applicant was not in attendance, but there weren't a lot of questions. It was pretty clear to the committee, and their main discussion was about thank you. I'm thinking light of signs, signs of light. Sight lines, and of course the height of them, and blocking views, or not blocking views, but blocking people trying to exit. So that was the biggest discussion, and we were understood from, and Michael was at the meeting, that none of those would be issues. So the recommendation to council, and I so move, that the development variance permit number DVP 14010 be authorized for issuance, which would have the effect of varying Section 12AI of the sign bylaw number 60 to permit 1 freestanding sign structure on each highway frontage on the property described as Lot 4, Section 1, Esquimalt District Plan 30085, 1880 Island Highway, subject to the following conditions. The sign structures, including associated foundations, shall be located entirely on private property, and the sign structures shall not impede sight lines, visibility for pedestrians, cyclists, or vehicular traffic in and around the driveway access egress locations to the satisfaction of the city engineer. The property owner shall obtain written approval from the city engineer prior to any construction of the freestanding sign structures.
Councillor Martin?
Two questions. The first, we're talking about once it's developed, right? We're not talking about a construction sign, correct? We're talking once it's developed. So the second question is, how is this different, these signs, compared to what's already on Souk Road, say like Saunders Subaru or Wendy's or anybody else? What's different about these signs that are like that they need to get a variance versus just 2 of them?
Correct. The bylaw permits this property to have only 1 sign.
Okay, that's why they're asking. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Councillor Day?
Thank you, and I just wanted to emphasize the importance of this corner. It's where we've done a number of tours with the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues, looking at the functionality for our roadways and sidewalks. And it's an area that's used extensively by people using scooters and wheelchairs and walkers. And of course, there's transit connections there as well. So I don't imagine that it has a huge impact, but there could be an impact in terms of we need wider sidewalk at the corner if where they're putting the foundations for their signs are. So just to point out a consideration for the engineer to consider when he's approving it.
Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving into 7.2, Finance and Admin Committee, 7.2.1, Multi-Use Facility Investigation. Councillor Martin, are you taking this? You are taking this one to
I can
Councillor
take
Day?
it.
Certainly. Or it might be more appropriate for Councillor Lukens, actually, because I
Okay.
wasn't at this meeting.
All right. Let's pass it around. Councillor Lucas,
Excellent.
you're on.
So there's been some discussion at the Heritage Commission about creating some space for museum to collect all the artifacts from Colwood's history that we got from out of the Chamber of Commerce and a number of others. Some dedicated art space, making a youth center, tourism center, possibly a cafeteria or some sort of training programs, et cetera. And it was discussed that there may be a possibility to move the Colwood Corners pub to the corner of Ocean Boulevard and Island Highway, which you may recall is a proposed site for the sewage treatment plant. So just so you know, there is enough room there to do this if we were planning on doing it. The Commission is interested in pursuing the concept of the multi-use facility, but we need Council's approval to investigate and then come forward with a report including the feasibility of the project. So this is basically just giving the Commission the authority to do some investigation to find out what the viability really is of it. Nothing more than that, and then a report would come forward to Council with more details. So that's all they're looking for your support for tonight, is just to get that ball rolling. So the recommendation is, and I so move, that Council support the Colwood Heritage Commission and staff investigating the feasibility of creating a multi-use facility by relocating the Colwood Corners Pub building to the corner of Ocean Boulevard and Island Highway.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Worship. I admire the initiative, and while I've spent some good quality time in the Colwood Pub, the old building, and I actually miss it. Yeah. My hang up here is just the location, and I think, and yeah, I think if the location came off, so there's more flexibility, and because there's probably a higher and best use, then I'd be more willing to support it. But kind of pigeonholes us into that location. So, thank you.
Councillor Martin?
Is there any financial implication to just doing the investigation?
I believe just staff time, and there would be committee members, that would be assisting with, investigating that. So I don't believe there's anything more than that. So.
Because I'm not necessarily supportive of this idea, but if it doesn't cost us anything to move it forward, then I'm okay with that part.
And if I can just say, I think the Ocean Boulevard site was identified simply because the city owns it, that property, and it's big enough to allocate it. But I don't think it's, again, it's not a done deal. It's part of the research, although I know it's identified in there.
Councillor Cullington?
Thank you. Like Councillor Logan, I think this is a wonderful idea. I'd love to see that old pub being reused, and I love the concepts that the Heritage Commission came forward with for that. But I don't think that's the best location. I think we've got a lot happening on that site, and I wouldn't like to constrain us. So I would move that we an amendment that we delete that last part of the resolution where it says to the corner of Ocean Boulevard and Island Highway.
Second.
Any comments, questions on the amendment? Seeing none, call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. On the amendment, back to the main motion now as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question on that one. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Yeah. 7.2.2, Emery Hall expansion and museum space.
I'd like to defer that, please.
So,
Same meeting?
Refer it.
yeah, same meeting. Yeah,
Should've
Councillor
one
Day
before the
left
other.
all the ones that cost money to me. So, the Commission had been looking at there had been some buzz about whether or not we should be expanding Emery Hall in order to accommodate the capacity of the existing St. John the Baptist Church, because the church can currently hold more than what the hall can legally. So gratefully, Turner Lane Developments took it upon themselves at no cost to expand the hall. They identified it was going to cost approximately $181,255,000. It was explained that the reason the cost was so high was due to the need to put in a sprinkler system, despite the old fire chief, and upgrade the water main. It was noted at the meeting with the long-term renters, most were quite happy with the hall as it was, and that they did not want to see an increase in rates. If there was an expansion done, it would take about 30 years of rentals every weekend to break even for the cost of the expansion. Other considerations have included having more events that may create an issue with the neighbors, as the building is in close proximity to the residential homes if you haven't been there. It was explained that the Commission has 3 options of promoting the rentals at the facilities or look at storage options such as a prefabricated outdoor shed for storage. So, because that was one of the other things, not only the capacity but also finding further storage for some of the renters that are there. So, it was recommended to Council, and I so move, that at this time the Emery Hall expansion not continue due to the cost, and that the Communications Manager work with the Heritage Commission to promote St. John's Church and Emery Hall as a wedding venue, and that the additional storage fitting with the design of the hall be investigated.
Comments, discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 7.2.3, report, Acting Director of Finance, 2015 permissive tax application for 345 Whale Road, the Children's Health Foundation of Vancouver Island. I imagine Councillor Martin defer to...
I would love to refer.
I feel like we're in a bit of a football match here this evening. There's a lot of handoffs. So...
No.
This report is basically a cleanup of an item that has not been accurate in the past, in that this organization has been benefiting from a permissive tax exemption, but it was never officially granted to them. So that's why this report is before you this evening, to basically clean that up. We've accepted their application. We've reviewed it. It meets all the criteria under the Community Charter, Section 2242A, which allows Council to provide tax exemptions for land or improvements that are owned by a charitable, philanthropic, or other not-for-profit corporation. So I don't really want to read all this out to you, but basically this recommendation is before you. The value of the municipal portion of the permissive exemption is $30,000 and change. But just a reminder that when we grant a permissive exemption, we are exempting the other taxes as well. And so this organization does benefit an additional $22,000. So the total value to them is $52,800. So if they didn't have that exemption, that would be funds they would have to find elsewhere.
And just as a reminder, just in addition to what our Acting Director of Finance has mentioned, I realize budgets sometimes can be overwhelming as we go through that, but if you will remember in past budgets, we have worked towards actually trying to eliminate the permissive tax application or funds. There was a feeling at one point that it was better to have them all grouped under a grant and aid, and so what we were doing was we were shifting some of the permissive tax exemptions over, and you know, I can tell you, remember there's the example of the counseling service that's out on Souk and Kelly. Thank you. We shifted that from being a permissive tax exemption to a grant and aid, and I worry. Well, I mean, it's going to be a new council they may decide to go in a completely different direction, but if we were trying to stay consistent with what our vision was from a budgeting standpoint, I would recommend that we move to a grant and aid of the $30,434.42 versus doing the permissive tax, but that's up to this council.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. And just because I've been here for so long, a little bit of history. There has been a permissive tax exemption granted to Pacific Centre Family Services Association since the first day that they opened that centre on Whale Road. And it has been tied to the square footage that is used for nonprofits, because a number of nonprofits that had received permissive tax exemptions through operating through churches, church basements, back corners of highly undesirable properties. When they built the Children's Foundation building, they brought all of those nonprofits together to provide all of the family and children's services in one location, a one-stop shop for the family. And what happened was 1 year after that was built, then those nonprofits were now, had been promised that they wouldn't have to pay rent or any more rent than they had previously been paying, now found themselves in a position of being in a bright, shiny new building that needed to pay taxes. So those portions of the building that are commercially rented out to VHA or other government agencies are paying the appropriate taxes for their share of the building. And we sort of, through changes in staff, looked at this differently and thought maybe it could be done differently. But what I can tell you is that those agencies have, even with a permissive tax exemption, have had a very hard time continuing to exist. And some of them have closed. And of those that remain without the permissive tax exemption, they would again be in very dire circumstances to come up with that additional $20,000 benefit that they enjoy when they've got the permissive tax exemption. So it's certainly worthy of a careful look in the future if we're going to change how we're doing that, because it may affect the services that are available in our community, which are already stretched very, very thin. You've all heard me before, but child mental health, for example, has the longest waiting list is in the West Shore. You wait 12 months for service in the West Shore. There are other parts of Victoria in which you only wait 4 months. It's a long commute for people in the West Shore to access other services in the downtown core, and sometimes that's not viable. So we're really grateful that there's so many services available close to home, and I hope that we can do everything we can to ensure that they can continue to operate in that facility.
Councillor Pillington?
Thank you. I can see there might be fodder for a discussion with the next council in terms of how they move forward, but I think at this moment in time this sort of cleans up where we are for the time being, and I would move the staff recommendation.
Any further discussion? Call the question then on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 7.2.4 Memorandum, Acting Director of Finance in regards to Solar Colwood in-kind contribution update. It is a memo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So the memo is not for action at this time. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with a bit of a respiratory infection here. But basically to let you know that I think you're aware that there was some in-kind contributions that were disallowed, the BC Hydro smart meters, and that staff are taking steps to ensure that any cash shortfall is going to be covered. The original contract was for about $12 million, the budget on this project. It has subsequently been reduced to $6 million, and now it's down to $4 million. And the reason for that is there wasn't as much uptake in the different solar Colwood products. But the good news is that the federal government had initially set aside 1/3. That was their contribution of $12 million. So they had set aside $4 million in cash. And we have spoken to them in terms of increasing their contribution from 1/3 up to as much as 50%. And that will mitigate any cash shortfall that we're looking at in this situation.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, through the chair, to the Director of Finance. Have we heard from the federal government as to whether or not they're going to accept this proposal?
We have had discussions with them. We don't have a firm, here's the check, but they've definitely said we're actually quite appreciative that we've let them know that the project scope has been decreased, because that frees up the cash that they've been holding for our project, for other projects. And Bruce, our consultant, has been working closely with them, and we have not heard that they are not going to approve it. I mean, I can't give you a recommendation tonight. This is just more to keep council informed of what we're working on to mitigate any possible cash shortfall.
Thank you.
Councillor Cullington?
Thank you. Comment and a question. So the suggestion of moving up to a maximum of 50% contribution actually came from NRCan themselves. They said this would be an appropriate ask coming from us. They have done it for another project, and actually a program that followed on the Clean Energy Fund, they automatically did 50%. But obviously we have to go through the process of applying for it. And actually I have a question for the rest of you around the table. There's, so it happens as part of a budget amendment, again, which goes to NRCan. So my question to all of you is, would you like to see that? Would you like it to come through committee and council or direct to council before it goes out? Or do you want to authorise staff to move forward on that directly?
Councillor Martin?
Well, I mean, it's fine if it comes through us, and I guess where I get concerned is I've had discussions since August, knowing about this issue, and it was my understanding that the federal government was already aware of this, and that we continually get these, yes, we'll go up to 50%, and we're just waiting to get a letter to say that we're going to 50%. But if we haven't officially even asked yet, and it's been 2 months, that concerns me a little. So I'm getting a little confused because I'm getting mixed messages between staff and what I'm hearing at the table tonight. We didn't
get the official. We heard verbally on the audit, but there wasn't the official information until much more recently.
About a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Day?
I note that they in the memo, it does mention that they have confirmed that other similar projects have been granted the 1/2 cash contributions previously. So I hear your concern, Councillor Martin, but I think the federal government tends to work more slowly than we're used to.
Sorry. I understand this is a federal government problem and not our problem. I mean, the problem was the federal government approved in the first place.
Correct.
And then their auditors have now come back and not approved it, and now has put the city at a financial disadvantage. So I guess that's just where I get concerned is I understand the federal, I don't know what the federal government's doing, to be honest. It's that's a different story. But I guess I do understand the long-term, like if I just look at worst-case scenario, I kind of understand where we're at. So where are we at from a budgeting standpoint under the worst-case scenario? Have we begun looking into that for next year's budget?
Yes, we have.
Okay, good. That's all I'm worried about.
I have a figure for you, Councillor Martin, if you would like it.
Oh, I think I know it.
Basically, Well, I'm curious, what figure did you have in mind?
My understanding is that we're at 39% at a $4 million budget, and we should be at 33. That would be a 6%, and at 6%, that would be $240,000.
So my solar Colwood guru, that would be Bruce Hampson, actually provided this to me. It was on my chair just prior to me coming into this meeting, so I haven't had a whole lot of chance to look at this, but maximum estimated liability at this point is $180,000. That's absolute worst case scenario if they don't advance us anything more than the 1/3 on the remaining claims that we submit. Okay? So that's worst case scenario. But that's speculation, Your Honor. That's assuming that that's what they're going to do.
It's just a bit disappointing because I think, the program's done everything right. It was allowed, and then we've gone through the process to find out that from their end, it maybe wasn't as up there as they had thought. So I'm glad to see that we're looking at ways that we can mitigate this.
Correct. That's the
end.
best we can do.
Yeah. Councillor Lukens?
Can I just ask, when do we expect to hear from the federal government or actually get it in writing, just not here?
Well, let's bring back a memo perhaps within a month, okay? I don't know any more than you, but I would expect that we have sent this off, so a month?
Yeah, because I remember during the last election, this was a very hot topic, and I know a number of people spoke to, how much it was going to cost each homeowner in Colwood, and, I just want to give them some sense of security before the next election, if at all possible, so that incumbents don't have to try and, wade through this creek again. It would be kind of nice.
Councillor Date?
I just wanted to point out, because it is a bit of a murky subject for people who may be watching the broadcast after the council meeting at home or elsewhere, that this contribution was in the original budget submitted in the grant application and was in the approved project when it was approved by NRCan. So we are talking about them changing their minds after the fact on this. So I think that it would be reasonable, given that other projects have had the exemption to go up to 50%, that it's not something that came out of the woodwork after we got going. This was in our budget from the outset.
Just wanted to say thank you to the finance staff for getting on this and just sort of confirming that we want them to kind of get this moving through ASAP with the full budget amendment.
I'll move receipt of the memo.
Good, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item then is 7.2.5, Report Chief Administrative Officer on Gas Operating Agreements, New Operating Fees.
I would like to
defer. I defer. About 25 years ago, in an attempt to provide assistance to developing natural gas pipelines on Vancouver Island, the provincial government of the day imposed a prohibition under the Vancouver Island Gas Pipeline Act. In essence, what this does is take away municipal ability to recover some of the costs of laying that distribution line within our municipal infrastructure. All communities on the mainland are entitled to this. So for the last 25 years, we've foregone millions and millions of dollars. So over the last 4 years, members of the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, or AVIC, have been engaged with joint discussions with Fortis BC and the provincial government to lay the groundwork and foundation for an agreement that would allow this redistribution of monies back to the municipalities. The estimate for next year is about $75,000 to the city of Colwood. By not looking at approving this agreement with Fortis, we'd be left on our own to try to negotiate ourselves. It may take a number of years, and we may not net a better agreement than what AVIC has been able to negotiate on our behalf. So tonight I am asking council to endorse the AVEX recommendation or recommended, sorry, I'm having trouble talking about it. Recommended gas operating agreement in the format provided by the Association of Vancouver Island and Coast Communities and attached to the Chief Administrative Officer report dated September 24th, 2014, and that the Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer be authorized to sign the agreement.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Worship. This is an excellent news story. One thing that I would suggest perhaps during the next budget process is instead of this funding going into the big dark hole, like happens with new revenue, is perhaps we target that funding, perhaps to the gas tax
Asset management
or
plans?
something like that, or asset management, something like that. So it's put to good use because it is a gas tax, so to speak. So that would be the most appropriate, and then we can earmark that, but just so it doesn't get lost. Enough gas. Yes.
To staff, was there a formula that you're aware of that they use to determine what those amounts are? Because you look at the names of the communities that are benefiting from what's going to be distributed. Was it based on hookups, users of the system?
I think it's the amount of distribution lines that have been laid within the communities and in part of the population within the municipality as well.
And I'll point out that of the communities that are here, 2 that are missing out of the system are Esquimalt and Oak Bay. And those 2 communities were under a different operating agreement that is also expiring at this time. So they will be receiving their windfall separately to this, but they will be participating as well. So call the question on the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item 7.2.6, Memorandum, Chief Administrative Officer, Workplace Bullying and Harassment Policy. It's finally before us.
Under normal procedure, the course of action would be to bring it to committee first. However, this is an occupational health and safety document that we've adapted for our own purposes for establishing policy and a policy statement. I'm not going to get into reading the entire report. However, I do ask that council support this policy, the procedures outlined within the policy to guide staff and employees of the workplace on how to initiate or, the guidelines to move forward on any claim of harassment or bullying. And secondly, to have council basically sign the policy statement. The directors have already signed a policy statement. Now this is something we're bringing forward to council as a policy statement as well.
Councillor Cullington?
Thank you. Good work by staff. It's good to have this. Just through you clarifying with the CAO, are you bringing this to the new council to sign, or are you going to do both?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's a good process to probably bring back to staff and council on an annual basis, just to update the skills and talk about different situations and move through those.
Any? Councillor Day?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that it's excellent work, and that the issues that are brought forward in this are something that we can all take to heart. Bullying is a big issue in the schoolyard. It's been a really big issue at the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee, and so it's great to see documents like this that clearly lay out what bullying is and what harassment is, and how to properly behave in the workplace. So it's a great example. So thank you.
Any others? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 7.2.7, memo from the Director of Admin, rescheduling November 24th. Do you know who we referred this one to?
No, I think I'll do this one.
Okay.
I'm a little tired tonight, but so this is obviously there's just a new council orientation, so I think it's sort of self-explanatory. So it's recommended that the regular meeting of council scheduled for Monday, November 24th be canceled, and a special meeting of council on Tuesday, November 25th happen.
Second.
Any questions on that, folks? I know, I'm just checking stuff.
I just want to state that another option is to cancel that November meeting altogether, but depending on the business of the day, that meeting may be warranted.
Usually at that time of the year, we need all the meetings we can get,
Christmas
it seems.
really crazy in December.
Just wanted to throw that as an option too. But
Thanks, but
Yep.
any other comments?
Just that I think this is very valuable, and I do support the monetary expense that Councillor Martin, our finance guy, didn't point out in his conversation.
Does this cost something?
So, I mean, it's very valuable not only for new members, but existing or incumbents and also staff to just refresher and engage with other communities. So I wholeheartedly support it.
if we can get all of the new council to attend this orientation session, we can bring our management team as well. They should
We
go.
can or cannot.
But if we can get it for free,
Maybe, just an aside, I don't think we need to add this to the recommendation, but perhaps what we could do is just maybe have Pat or somebody reach out to all the candidates and just let them know that day would be hopefully something for them
I
to keep in
believe
mind.
she is sending a reminder notice around folks, I think tomorrow, just for certain important dates, plus give a bit of a going forward, if you are a successfully elected individual, this is what's going to be hitting you in the next 2 weeks, kind of a thing.
Good.
So, Councillor Day?
I just wanted to say how very valuable I've found these sessions to be. I've attended the ones that have been put on by the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities and these ones, and it's a great, it really invigorates your democratic process because it's about that process. So I think that's so important in a day when we're trying to reach out, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or how we're reaching out, we're trying to engage with residents, and it's not always easy because we have quite an archaic system that we operate under to promote fairness, but the sessions can really make a difference to the council being able to understand and know what to work, what to do when.
Any others? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We are moving into Section 8, Bylaws. 8.1, Bylaw number 1555 for first, second, and third readings. Exempt certain land and improvements from taxation for a 10-year period. Do we need any introduction on this?
Move introduction.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Move second.
Second.
Any discussion, comment? Councillor Martin?
Yeah, thank you. I just looking at the list, I just was not aware the Boys and Girls Club had an actual club in Colwood.
You're part of it, right?
Like, where's that?
It's actually in...
Boys and Girls Club is there now. Oh, no, I didn't know that.
They operate some services there.
Okay. No, I just wasn't aware. I just had that question. Thank you.
Councillor Day?
And just for information of the public, this is also removing one address from our exemption list, which was the 3319 Painter Road, as well as adding the Pacific Center, our family building on Whale Road.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next bylaw before us is bylaw number 1539 for final reading. Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989 Amendment number 139, Residential 6R6 Zone.
Move final.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Just there's no address associated.
I can speak to that. A note that was provided by the director. There is no address included in that bylaw, as the R6 zone is meant to be available for future rezonings rather than just the property subject to the current rezoning, 686 Donovan. The proposed bylaw number 538 on tonight's agenda assigns 686 Donovan to the R6 zone and includes reference to the property. Does that satisfy your question?
Any other comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Looking for final reading again for 8.3, bylaw number 1538. Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, amendment number 138.
Move third. Oh, sorry, excuse me, we're final.
All those in favor?
Final or third?
Opposed?
We're in final.
Motion carried. 8.4, bylaw number 1550, final reading, Colwood, City of Colwood Subdivision and Development Bylaw, 1995, amendment number 49.
Move final.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Motion to move in camera?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. In